Nami hates Arlong because the pirate crew he led oppressed the villagers. Moreover, the main reason is that he killed her mother Belmere, which is why, in the original story, she didn't hold a particular grudge against the other fishmen. She couldn't forgive Arlong. Why did Belmere have to die? Just because of her resistance and inability to pay? Because of her status as a retired marine, which sparked Arlong's hatred. Everyone knows Arlong is a vicious pirate, but only Ezekiel knows that compared to the celestial dragons, he is like a sweet child. After Arlong came to East Blue, he set a price that, although made life extremely difficult for people, was still affordable. Once the money was paid, he wouldn't take unnecessary actions. Will looked at Arlong, who faced death, and thought, "This guy has a terrible reputation, but he's far less frightening than those called celestial dragons." Now that the evil here is corrected, sooner or later the sky will return to normal. Absolutely, the one who possesses the devil fruit of a mobile phone and sees the world with such backward development cannot turn away and not want to pave a new path. Ezekiel looked around and didn't commit any more killings. The fishmen had once been slaves to the celestial dragons. They were real slaves, unlike the residents of Kokoyasi, who had the opportunity to buy their freedom. Pirate Tiger, no matter how hard he tried, could not truly love and accept humans. He even refused a transfusion of human blood, which led to his death. He didn't condone the atrocities of humans, but before he died, he also realized that the cycle of hatred between fishmen and humans must be stopped. One day in the future, when Nami learns what calamities the fishmen have suffered at the hands of humans, what will she do? With these thoughts, Ezekiel opened the phone and dialed a number. Yes. A somewhat puzzled female voice sounded on the other end. She seemed not to understand how someone could call her when she had only just figured out how to use the phone. "Is this Tashigi-chan?" Ezekiel smiled as he saw on the phone screen that Tashigi was still in the shower. That voice. "Is it you?" After a brief discussion, he explained the situation. Tashigi immediately promised to bring people to arrest Arlong. Of course, she would inform Smoker. Ezekiel could have contacted the Marines headquarters directly, and they might have come to arrest this guy. But he didn't want to approach the Marines directly, not because he feared the world government and the Marines, but because he trusted the rank and file officers. Ezekiel was the king of the country, and he wasn't a mindless thug. He needed to solve situations correctly. Pirates are thieves, not discernible through reason. They always resort to violence. Marines are officials and mostly reasonable people who handle their roles effectively. It was the world government that used Crocodile and Weeble against Alabasta. A few days later, the villagers handed over the tied-up fishermen pirates to Smoker. Everything ended happily. As Tashigi was tying the pirates to the deck one by one, Ezekiel was still there, watching from afar. "What are you looking at, boss?" Nami appeared in the sunlight with a heartfelt smile that Ezekiel had never seen from her before. The tattoo on her shoulder had transformed into a different pattern, and somehow, a dark blue pendant with a gemstone had appeared around her neck. It was the heart of the sea depths. She was generally a good girl and everything well. Except when it came to money. So in the end, she didn't return the heart of the sea depths to Ezekiel, simply claiming she'd pay him back from her salary. According to their agreement, she became his employee. Although she didn't know what Ezekiel wanted from her, she had already identified him as someone she could trust, whoever he might be. In this prolonged hell, he was the only person who reached out to her and helped drive away all the darkness. "I think those sun tattoos are really dazzling," Will said, something she didn't quite understand. Nami looked at the sun tattoos on Arlong's pirate crew members. She had been with them for so many years, but she never understood who they were or what their tattoos meant. She only knew that they came from the Grand Line. Ezekiel had told her a bit about the Sun Pirates, but it seemed that this mysterious new boss knew a lot about them. So, Genzo and Nojiko had no objections to Nami becoming Ezekiel's subordinate, and they didn't have the same anxiety they had when she went on board Luffy's ship. It was the most ordinary situation. Is there any danger in a normal job? At that time, the residents of Kokoyasi village didn't understand who they were sending Nami off with. They were on a sea vessel that the Arlong pirates had stolen somewhere. The villagers helped load supplies and transfer the mandarin tree. The vessel finally departed from Kokoyasi village. All right. Nami waved goodbye from afar to the elderly people and at the same time touched countless wallets. Ezekiel couldn't help but smile. The boat sailed further and further until the shore disappeared from sight. Nami looked at Ezekiel, who sat on the deck wearing dark sunglasses, drinking mandarin juice and enjoying the sun, and mumbled, "Hey, rich guy." Ezekiel turned his head to look at her, and Nami immediately changed her expression to a flattering smile. "Boss, where are we sailing to?" Ezekiel felt a little uneasy. "I think you need a mobile phone first." He took out a phone and handed it to Nami. "What is this?" Nami took it and turned it over in her hands. "It's a mechanical den mushy phone, created by the royal family of Alabasta, but it doesn't just function as a den mushy. Actually, I wasn't only looking for a fruit source, but more importantly, I was looking for a navigator with enough talent to enhance the world map," he said, pointing his finger to open the ocean map on the phone. Nami looked in awe at these magical operations. After all, they testified to the existence of a legendary navigation talent. She could almost immediately see the significance of the ocean maps. Even though she didn't know what a log pose was, she could understand just how significant the invention of the ocean maps was. Alabasta is a country on the Grand Line and can invent such a powerful thing. But in reality, she was mistaken. It's not that every country on the Grand Line has to be that strong, and Alabasta is not so great, but the king of Alabasta is quite powerful. From today, you are the dean of the Alabasta Cartography Institute and the general manager of the ocean maps, Ezekiel said. "Oh, come on. Boss, are you an official in Alabasta? And can you give out such positions?" Nami quickly reacted. Ezekiel slightly lifted his sunglasses, opened his eyes, and looked at Nami, seemingly surprised. "Have I never told you who I am?" "It seems you did, but..." Nami's lips trembled. "In Alabasta, no one dares to defy my words," Ezekiel simply said. "Then you must be His Majesty the King of Alabasta," Nami said, pursing her lips. "Yes," Ezekiel confirmed. "Then I'm the Queen of Alabasta." Nami blurted out, not quite believing what Ezekiel had said. Although in her opinion, he was certainly a person of high status in Alabasta. After all, what kind of king is this? Could he really be such a fool, personally rolling up his sleeves to avenge her, and on top of that, going out to buy fruit for the country instead of lying in his own castle enjoying these fruits? "If you want to be a queen," Ezekiel mumbled, watching Nami's retreating back and touching his chin, "at least we'll have to wait another 2 years. Doo-doo." The phone rang. "Hello," said Ezekiel. "Your Majesty, the world government is already aware of your location." It was the voice of Fujitora. It had been almost a month since Ezekiel left Alabasta. He had been at sea for several weeks. No wonder his location had been determined, given that he had been away from Alabasta for so long. "Do I need to go to East Blue?" Fujitora asked. "Relax," Ezekiel replied with a smile. Fujitora said nothing further. He trusted the king, who had such remarkable ambitions. But he had to inform him about the situation. After Ezekiel hung up the phone, he pondered for a moment. After all, this was the world government, a vast organization with an 800-year history. Their power extends across 170 countries worldwide. Dealing with such an organization required much careful consideration. Likely the world government, having learned of his location, had already sent someone to secretly assassinate him. Although Arlong's pirate crew was destroyed, the villagers didn't see who did it. Even if they had, they wouldn't be able to name the true identity. In other words, in the eyes of the world government, Ezekiel is still just an ordinary person. Therefore, if they send someone to capture Will, it definitely won't be a strong individual, at least not at the level of an admiral. Several days later. Headlines in Taoxiao. Ocean map updated again. Brilliant idea from the new dean of the Cartography Institute in Alabasta. Is the dean a woman? Guess the true identity of the dean. Discussions on the forum. Ocean map. Updated. Perfumer Lily. It's so detailed. Blue sea cucumber. Incredible, it even shows the roads of our village, Wandering Chuang. It turns out this pirate crew was on a neighboring island. That's terrible. Why did the Marines bypass them and not suppress them? Skywatcher. Ezekiel set down the receiver, and the corners of his mouth twitched. It must be said that these individuals' usernames truly reflect the characteristics of the first generation. This is pure first-generation internet users. It seems that through his efforts, the world has already started to take on its initial shapes. The feeling of the internet age, at least in Alabasta, is like this. The forum and Taoxiao haven't been updated since their creation, but after Ezekiel took in Nami, the first genius, he can truly say she has special skills. She completed her work on the way to Syrup Island. The ocean map has been updated 3 times. The first update provided more complete coordinates of East Blue Islands. The second update included the locations of specific villages and kingdoms on the islands in East Blue. In the third update, the locations of various pirate factions were marked, along with appropriate danger signs based on their bounties. These were data compiled by Ezekiel about the island she visited in the past. Although the records were destroyed, everything still remained in her memory. In the cabin. Ring. Ring. As the phone rang, Nami, who was writing a new note, set her pen aside. Is this the dean? I'm a reporter from Taoxiao, and I'd like to. It turned out this call was from a Taoxiao staff member. Leave me alone. Nami immediately hung up the phone. In the chief editor's office of Taoxiao, several reporters and editors exchanged glances. Finally, the silent chief editor stood up and quietly edited the headline. Shock. The dean is a delightful conversationalist. Since a few days ago, when Ezekiel had directly conveyed the appointment of Nami by mobile phone, everyone in Alabasta learned about the new official Nami, and various departments repeatedly called her for coordination. Hearing the commotion in the cabin, Ezekiel smiled. It seems that the development of these 3 applications is on the right track, so it's time to develop new applications. Thinking this, he wrote on paper. Ocean TV. Now that people have a platform to express themselves, there's no reason to leave video broadcasts solely to the government. Royal Television of Alabasta. Could this application further impact newspapers and other media worldwide? Although Ezekiel has undermined the sales of nearly all newspapers, if given a new way to survive, they would immediately become allies. After all, in this world, there are no absolute enemies or absolute friends, only absolute interests. Then there's only one person who can do this for him. Big News Morgans. Syrup Village was located nearby. Ezekiel and Nami hadn't yet disembarked from the ship, but someone was already waiting for them on the shore. It was a young girl sitting in a wheelchair. Beside her stood 2 butlers in tuxedos, but the head of the Syrup family, a notable maritime trader, was not with them. The ship was docked. Ezekiel changed into a formal suit and disembarked from the boat with Nami, who was also dressed in an elegant women's suit. The village was named after the Syrup family. The people who founded the village are the ancestors of the Syrup family. They have lived on this island for several generations. There's a mansion villa here with a centuries-old history. Butler Mary and a second butler, whom Ezekiel did not know, both bowed deeply, and Kaya, who was seated in the wheelchair, also gracefully inclined her head. Welcome to us, esteemed Mr. Ezekiel. Kaya, as the family's representative, suppressed her sorrow and forced herself to smile. But she knew that the one standing before her could never harm her. It was His Majesty the King of Alabasta. Speaking of the Syrup family's fate, it was more than a year ago. At that time, Ezekiel wasn't even the king of Alabasta yet, and he had the good fortune to meet a prominent businessman from the East Blue, who was Kaya's father. After getting to know him, Ezekiel became his friend. Before Ezekiel's arrival, Kurohidal had already been talking on the phone. The Syrup family still deliberately did not reveal Ezekiel's identity. Kurohidal respectfully curled his lips, and at the same time he became even more curious to learn the true identity of Ezekiel. It seems like I'm here at an inconvenient time, Ezekiel said, looking at the 3 of them. I'm sorry, my father can't come to greet you. Last year he went out to sea. Kaya's eyes filled with tears. It's a pity. Ezekiel initially wanted to entrust the management of Daha Taoxiao to this businessman. The eyes behind Kurohidal's glasses sparkled. No matter how much he probed, he couldn't discover the identity of the distinguished guest from Mary. Even little Kaya kept the secret. What is his status? What could make these two people so formal? More importantly, this guy was making such promises. It's clear that this person must hold a very high position. Inside the mansion it was a bit chilly. The Syrup family didn't have many servants. Besides Kaya, who had a cook and a maid, no one else lived there. Despite this, the luxury was still striking to the little thief Naomi. You really deserve to be a butler in such a wealthy family, Naomi said, holding a vase. I have a good reputation, Mary said, bowing to prepare tea. Besides, like Mr. Ezekiel, the Syrup family can be considered ordinary people. Koro had all held his glasses in an odd position, pondering why his team of fools hadn't arrived yet. Isn't it a good idea that when they land, he will become a pirate once more and kill everyone here? But these pirates are unreliable guys, it seems he'll have to do everything himself anyway. I'm going to pay my respects to your father, Ezekiel said to Kaya after drinking tea. Kaya stood up upon hearing these words and led Ezekiel and Naomi out of the mansion. They walked along the road in front of the village and headed towards the Syrup family cemetery. The new tomb and the old tomb were combined into one. My father's last wish was to be buried with his wife, Kaya said, bursting into tears. Ezekiel merely handed her a handkerchief, unable to offer more help. Although a mobile phone is very useful, it doesn't possess the ability to bring people back to life. At least not yet. Kaya. At that moment, Mary frowned, and a voice he didn't like came from afar. It was that poor boy who had recently appeared at the mansion, a guy who loves to talk a lot. Soon, a teenager with a long nose burst into the cemetery panting and covered in sweat. Yusuf. Kaya shouted his name. Kaya. Mary. Yusuf angrily pointed at Koro Hadal. That bastard, he's a pirate known as Koro of 100 Plans. He wants to kill Miss Kaya, take her property, and kill your guests. Everyone fell silent, then Mary said with a smile. Yusuf. Are you joking? He didn't believe it, nor did Kaya. After all, Yusuf likes to lie to people and has done so many times, and Koro Hadal has been in Kaya's house for over a year. If he really is a pirate, how could he have hidden it all this time? What I said is true. Yusuf broke into tears, upset that no one believed him. Stop lying, Kaya said somewhat helplessly. At this moment, Ezekiel quietly asked. Then how did he know there are guests at the Syrup family today? Mary was stunned, and Kaya quickly reacted as well. Yes, Yusuf couldn't have known there were guests at the Syrup family. But he just clearly said that Koro Hadal wants to kill your guests, so that means... Mary quickly shielded Kaya behind him, and looked at Koro suspiciously. Very unfortunate. Koro finally stopped pretending and smiled. He took out 2 strange gloves and slowly put them on. The tips of the gloves were sharp blades. He said, I am Koro of 100 Plans with a bounty of 16 million. I am the captain of the pirates, though I don't know where my idiots are, why they haven't arrived yet, but I don't want to wait any longer. All of you die here today. Ezekiel looked at this guy with the nickname Koro of 100 Plans with interest. It's not an empty nickname. Although he's just a minor character in the original book, he is in fact the second most intelligent person in the world of One Piece. In terms of IQ, he is only surpassed by Ben Beckman, a member of the crew of the Emperor, the red-haired pirates. But this time Koro was mistaken. Ezekiel stood in front of several people, protecting them, and at the same time said indifferently to Koro, Do you know who you are standing in front of right now? Such an extraordinarily noble spirit briefly stunned Koro. He admitted he had never seen a person with such a demeanor, but he still intended to kill him. However, Koro was cautious enough at heart and vaguely felt that something was off. Foo 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 foo. At this moment, a strange laugh came from the cemetery. Everyone looked up and saw a tall man with flamingo-colored glasses, accompanied by a large number of subordinates, emerging from behind the cemetery. That's the guy, Ezekiel murmured. He certainly understood that the world government doesn't deal with small fry like Koro, but he wasn't relaxed at all. Bam! Miaoban Siam and Butchie were thrown to the ground like rags by Diamante. It could be said for certain that the entire Donquixote family was sent here. Except for the childlike Sugar and Trebol, who was protecting her. They stayed in Dressrosa, while all the other officers were here. So, a new king instead of the former king. How could such a person die at the hands of mere fish? Daffy smiled and stared at Vila. The Donquixote family lined up in a row, with Doflamingo at the forefront standing opposite Vila, while Coro was positioned between the two groups. If you plan to do this yourself, why trouble me? Coro asked. Daffy remained silent. Gladius, with his long spiky hair, dashed forward instantly. Boom. Coro immediately lost all combat composure, flipped over, crashed into several tombstones and fell to the ground vomiting blood. For a piece of trash like you, it's better not to interfere in a conversation between two kings if you want to stay alive. The Donquixote family will not cooperate with such garbage, Gladius said coldly. Coro couldn't stop vomiting blood, and his glasses were already broken, but his expression was calmer than ever. Who is this guy? The Donquixote family. Mary's pupils narrowed. You're the Donquixote family from the Grand Line, Dressrosa. The crew of one of the Shishibukai, Doflamingo, the heavenly demon. Initially calm Nami, who knew Will was strong, now also panicked a little. Shishibukai. No matter how ignorant she was, she knew the significance of that term. These were strong pirates, famous throughout the Grand Line and beyond. They were recognized and supported by the Marines and the world government. They are real monsters. Why did such a man come for her boss? What kind of fate is this? Is it possible that right after gaining freedom, I'm about to die? Is it not too late to run away? I still need to spend 80 million berries. Doflamingo Ezekiel smiled. What did the world government promise you? Doflamingo laughed. The tips of his fingers danced with visible white lines, which finally turned into blades. His Majesty the King of Alabasta, Ezekiel Nefertari, one of the last 20 kings who rejected the celestial dragons. King of Alabasta. Celestial dragons. Descendant of the 20 kings. These words were too shocking for those present, even members of the Donquixote family. No wonder such a person came personally for a grand battle. It turns out this guy is truly worthy of such a fight. You are really the King of Alabasta. Nami exclaimed, her expression changing rather quickly. So, this guy wasn't lying to her. He's really a king. A king who rules a super kingdom with a population of 220 million people, a king with an army of almost 1 million. Who would have thought he'd come to East Blue to buy tangerines? Celestial dragons. Coro's hands trembled, and he was planning to kill a descendant of the 20 kings all by himself. In any case, this descendant is someone who had the right to hold the title of Celestial Dragon. More than 170 countries have joined the world government, but there is only one such king with such a strong personality. Farewell, Your Majesty, a man with a similar fate. Doflamingo smirked, and cutting thread suddenly shot out from his hands. Doflamingo lost the title of Celestial Dragon because his father gave it up, and Ezekiel lost the status of Celestial Dragon because his ancestors gave it up. Their destinies were indeed similar. And each of them was a unique individual. Could they really witness the fall of such a noble person, here and now? At the moment when the thread blades were about to touch Ezekiel, he was already covered with armament haki. Daffy was shocked, and his laughter ceased. He never imagined that this king, who seemed to possess no power, was also a master. I never needed such a status. Moreover, someday I will destroy this world structure, and the power that should not exist. Then I will build a new world. Ezekiel looked at the entire Donquixote family. Finally, he decided to no longer hide this. Since sooner or later it would be impossible to conceal, why bother with these unnecessary complexities? Ezekiel raised a finger, which lit up with a laser beam that pierced through Gladius in an instant. Boom! A powerful explosion roared. The Donquixote family and Doflamingo himself were shocked. What kind of abilities is he using? What is this? Kazaru's fruit. Is he dead? The smile vanished completely from Daffy's face, and his expression gradually became one of utter terror. This guy not only has a devil fruit power but also a light fruit similar to Kazaru, and he's incredibly strong. The idiots from the world government aren't even aware of this. Is Kazaru really dead? What the hell is happening? These dramatic, unexpected shifts in the balance of power shocked everyone present. Do you think you can handle me? Ezekiel was already angry. Since he came into this world, he had hidden his powers, kept a low profile, and despite being condemned by the world government many times, he tried his best to hide his identity. But now, enough is enough. Since it's too hard to bear and there's no real need for it, from now on Ezekiel wants to reveal his identity and appear openly in this world. He will step forward. The whole world and the world government will come to know about him. Boom. A terrifying wave of light burst forth, and this time it pierced through Diamante. Diamante's injury shocked everyone. This guy resembled a true admiral. Enough. Daffy was furious, irritated by Will constantly injuring his family members. A terrifying conqueror's haki erupted, suppressing everyone around. Ordinary people on the entire island instantly lost consciousness. It was as dreadful as the end of the world, like flashes of black lightning causing catastrophic weather changes. Seeing this, Nami was left speechless. What is this power capable of changing the world? Ezekiel also unleashed his conqueror's haki without hesitation. Compared to Doflameho's black lightning, his haki was like a golden sun, and they clashed with one another. Boom. The terrifying explosion weakened layer by layer, like ripples in the air. A collision of conqueror's haki. Diamante stared in shock at the scene before him. This was the level of the king, 1 in a million people. These two were undoubtedly unique kings. Veins appeared on Daffy's forehead. 5 colored threads. 5 threads, shimmering in different colors, were released, and in an instant, Ezekiel was caught. But there was not a trace of blood on him. He transformed into a photon element. Of course, it's the Logia-type devil fruit. Daffy was genuinely shocked. What does this mean? When did Kizaru die? He wasn't aware of such an important event. Is the world government trying to kill Ezekiel Nefertari, or do they want to eliminate Doflameho himself? Nami had never seen devil fruit abilities, let alone the power of the Logia natural element fruit. If she hadn't seen Ezekiel unharmed, she would have thought it was all over. It's a Logia-type devil fruit ability. Koro, who had previously been coughing up blood, began to understand something. No wonder this guy never swims in the sea, Nami suddenly realized. Logia fruits are considered the most valuable and powerful among devil fruits. They can turn a person's body into natural elements, making ordinary attacks ineffective against them, Koro said. What is a devil fruit? What is Logia? Nami asked curiously. The so-called devil fruit is a secret treasure of the seas. Anyone who eats such a fruit will possess extraordinary powers, but at the same time, they will feel helpless at sea and become a sitting duck, Koro explained coldly. So Ezekiel is invincible. Nami said in shock. No. On the Grand Line there is another power capable of combating this ability. It's called haki. I've only heard that the ability of people to color parts of their body black is likely armament haki. And this mysterious clash of forces must be the legendary Conqueror's haki. Conqueror's haki. Yusuf was intrigued. The so-called Conqueror's haki means that only 1 in a million people possesses the qualities of a king. These two have such qualities. It's truly terrifying. Koro mused, observing what was happening. There is no doubt that either of these two is a king. Today, he was fortunate to witness a battle of such caliber. Perhaps even if he were to perish, it would be worth it. He also had a dream of returning to the sea, but dreams always remain dreams. Although he had created many worlds with his exceptionally sharp mind, it was this unusual wisdom that made him realize that with his qualifications, no matter how hard he worked, it was impossible to reach the heights of this world. Koro sighed, watching as these two constantly clashed. They are monsters. But human beings have limits. Inexplicably, Koro understood this truth. Daffy's tricks are cunning and strange, while Ezekiel's strength is magnificent, and the laser sword, gathering clouds in the sky, sliced through the 5 colored threads that emitted a dazzling light. During the fierce battle, Doflameho realized that if the fruit didn't awaken, his power wouldn't be enough to defeat this guy. Storm thread. He crossed his arms with a smirking grin, and tens of thousands of white silk threads condensed together, transforming into a terrifying wave of threads rushing at Ezekiel. This was an ability that could only be used after the fruit had awakened. The opponent didn't know, but Daffy's fruit had awakened. It was evident that the pressure on him was too great. Light speed strike. Ezekiel took the shock wave with a single blow and simultaneously soared high into the sky, dodging and attacking. Yasakanai no Magatama. Countless laser beams fell from the sky and rushed towards Doflamaho and the Donquixote family. This maneuver finally revealed the unprecedented destructive power of one of the three admirals. Damn it. Daffy was furious. Birdcage. A huge network of threads rises from all sides above the island, encompassing the entire Syrup Island in a circle, and this network of threads continues to tighten over time. Ezekiel, everyone on this island will be buried because of you. Ezekiel looked coldly at the scene before him, then slowly raised his right hand. In the next second, an extremely cold air burst forth, a chill capable of freezing the world, reflected in Doflamaho's frightened gaze. Ice Age. Boom. The wire mesh of the enormous birdcage was covered with a layer of ice from top to bottom. Under the sunlight, it seemed as if a gigantic icy cage was woven in the sky, radiating brilliance. The birdcage was completely frozen, for even if it wasn't afraid of water and fire, it couldn't ignore the cold that reached absolute zero. A freezing fruit. How is this possible? Daffy and the others stared in shock at Ezekiel's hands, which turned into photons when he used his ice power. Is there really someone in this world who can possess two devil fruit abilities at once? And both are Logia. Such a monster really exists. Diamante trembled. Now he doesn't believe that Doflamaho can defeat Will. Nothing's working, maybe we should leave. This is just so frightening. Now that Ezekiel has revealed his true nature, his opponents must be prepared to face the horrors of his real power. A sword gathering clouds in the sky was raised high as Ezekiel looked indifferently at Daffy and struck with a sharp swing. Daffy was ready to resist, but did not expect nothing to happen. What's going on? Daffy's pupils narrowed as he looked up at the sky. A massive shadow fell over his head. It was a gigantic meteorite engulfed in flames. Another devil fruit. Damn it. How many fruit abilities does this guy have? It feels like Daffy stumbled into a hornet's nest. How did he become such a true monster? Without a doubt, this guy is a person with multiple fruit abilities. Such a thing is unheard of and unprecedented. The terrifying meteorite shattered the birdcage in an instant, which was already on the verge of collapse from the freezing, and then crashed into Doflamaho. Daffy was left with no choice but to concentrate a heavy wave of threads to counteract it. Defensive strings. Boom. An overwhelming explosion rang out. The shield created by Daffy in haste was torn to pieces, and he coughed up blood, falling to his knees. White threads quickly stitched up the injuries on Doflamaho's body. Only when he felt better did he stand up and look at Ezekiel in horror. He wanted to ask, is he really human? The remaining team members responsible for protecting the Donquixote family ship, McVise and the half-fishman Dellinger, were sitting on the deck, watching the large-scale events unfold in the distance. The next moment, they felt a shadow rise behind them. May I ask, is this Syrup Village? It was the voice of an old man. The two turned their heads and saw two disabled individuals who had appeared on the deck at an unknown time, a blind man and an old man with an injured arm. They had smiles on their faces. These two sighed heavily, but thankfully they could handle this on their own since it was just two disabled men. Boom. 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 Ezekiel, lacking extensive combat experience, was quite rough and straightforward in battle. He immediately began a full-scale bombardment. The Ice Age covered nearly half of Syrup Village's graveyard. Since ice has a certain reflective property, it was quite effective for the next attack, the octagonal mirror. A fierce aura flashed in Doflamaho's eyes. He was a king, not some trash to be easily kicked around. At this moment, Daffy was undoubtedly losing, but he refused to believe it himself. If it's just because you possess a powerful devil fruit, then I will bury you in your own arrogance, Ezekiel Nefertari. Dodging another large-scale attack from Ezekiel, Daffy sneered and unleashed his strongest attack at Ezekiel in the sky without hesitation. Shot of 16 holy bullets of misfortune. 16 terrifying threads enveloped in dark armament haki, resembling steel rods. This attack was crafted to attempt to slay gods in the sky. But you, Ezekiel Nefertari, will be the first to be killed. Seeing this attack, Ezekiel realized it was too late to use his fruit ability in a hurry. The fruit ability was not his strong suit. Even though he had achieved the highest development of the fruit, he still lacked significant combat experience. But avoiding an opponent's attack was still not his style. Instead, he used Admiral-level Haki. A full force punch to the forehead. Doffy, you can honestly take this blow if you surpass the strength of an admiral. The status of the king is not just about the power of the fruit. It seemed that even the air around them became denser, and the thick black color on his fist mixed with a red glow. Then he aimed his Haki-covered fist directly at the threads of the shot of 16 holy bullets of misfortune, which by that point had converged into a sharp spike. Boom. For 3 seconds there was an almost hopeless situation, and in the end, the shot of 16 holy bullets of misfortune shattered into pieces. Ezekiel's unharmed fist struck Doflamingo in the face in an instant, and his body plummeted to the ground. Doffy coughed up blood, and was nearly unconscious. The ability to fight was completely lost. Even if the Ito fruit could challenge the heavens, there was no way for Doflamingo to get back up now. Ezekiel's body slowly descended to the ground. Doffy. The members of the Donquixote family rushed forward to protect the seriously injured Doflamingo and to prevent Ezekiel from approaching and continuing the attack. Ezekiel certainly felt that his physical strength was significant, but therein lay his weakness. He had simply enhanced his physique through armament Haki. Ultimately, he had not undergone the tempering that Luffy had, and he lacked the experience to preserve physical strength. If this battle had been against Fujitora, who had his own methods and capabilities, everything might have been over in less than 10 minutes. Damn it. Damn it. Young master. The most muscular elite officer of the Donquixote family, Pika, a Paramecia-type devil fruit user of the Ishi no Mi, which allows its user to absorb, manipulate, and merge with stone, made a sound that was a sharp contrast to his bulky body. Huh. Nami laughed loudly. What's up with this guy? How can he make such funny sounds? Ezekiel looked at Pika and smiled because he had already come up with a plan. Among all the abilities, at the moment, he was most eager to obtain the power of the Ishi no Mi fruit. After all, as long as there are enough materials, using the stone fruit for construction could be more efficient than 1,000,000 people working together. Let's take the young master out of here. Although he couldn't handle this man once he comes to his senses, he'll kill everyone on this island. Diamante looked coldly at Ezekiel, trying to gauge if Will would let them go. Ezekiel got that if so many people acted together, he really wouldn't be able to get rid of them all while ensuring Kaya, Nami, and the others' safety. After all, some of them wield devil fruit powers, and he didn't want to kill them. You won't succeed. Usopp was genuinely frightened by the fierce looks of these people. I have tens of millions of people gathered on the beach, ready to rush to my aid. Tens of millions of people. This amused Nami. Couldn't you come up with a more believable number? Tens of millions of people, how could that be? Boom. 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 At this moment, the earth began to tremble slightly. Everyone was slightly stunned. What's happening? Is it an earthquake? What is that? Baby 5, who had the best view, saw something approaching in the distance. Everyone looked up and saw black dots appearing beyond the far horizon. These black dots were becoming more and more numerous, and the distance to them was getting closer and closer. They surrounded from all sides, and there were too many to count. Tens of millions of people. Everyone looked at Usopp, and even those who had been calm were now shocked. Wasn't this guy just bragging? Are there really tens of millions of people? Everyone was skeptical of the words of the biggest liar, Usopp. How could there be tens of millions of people here? No. It was unbelievable. What he said was a lie. I didn't expect you to be special, but now I'm going to rely on you. Nami pushed Usopp forward, and Usopp was ready to cry. I'll kill you. Pika shouted menacingly. No, I'm not. First, let's kill this dangerous guy. The Donquixote family quickly reached a consensus. Only Ezekiel displayed a calm smile, as he already knew what was happening because those two had arrived. From behind the Donquixote family, a faint voice was heard. Who are you planning to kill? Diamante and the others turned and saw two old men dragging two of their people unconscious. It's Dellinger and McVise. Upon closer inspection of the two individuals, everyone saw that one of the old men was a male with purple hair, sunglasses, and missing a right arm, and the other was a blind samurai with a sword. Two disabled men. What nonsense is this? These two guys. Diamante's pupils narrowed as his body shook with a tremor. It's the former Admiral Black Arm Zephyr, and the blind samurai Fujitora. Ignoring Diamante and the others, Fujitora and Zephyr bowed to Ezekiel. "Your Majesty," smiled Fujitora, the commander of the Royal Guard of Alabasta. "The army of Alabasta has arrived to take you home." Diamante, Nami, and the others were shocked as their gazes turned to the loud cries coming from afar. A stream of hundreds of thousands of people finally surrounded them. These were soldiers, neatly arranged and dressed in standard black military uniforms, holding sharp swords that reflected the cold gleam of the sun. "Salute the king." Following Pell's shout, 100,000 people simultaneously knelt before their king, and the sound echoed for hundreds of miles. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Your Majesty." If one were to use a single word to describe the mood of the Donquixote family at this moment, it would be cursed. 100,000 soldiers. This is an incredible failure. The same posture, the same swords, the same aura, the same gaze. The incomparable sense of oppression created by this army was akin to the effects of Conqueror's haki. In this world where strength decides everything, there had never been a king like Ezekiel. For the first time in history, the concept of a true army appeared in this world. This military concept from Earth's millennia-long history of warfare had for the first time blossomed in its magnificent glory in this world. No fear, no chaos. Only obedience and order. Usually, no matter how many people someone like Hottie Jones from Fishman Island could gather, even if it were an army of 100,000 fishmen, so what? That entire crowd of fishmen was swept away by Luffy's Conqueror's haki. But it's different with Ezekiel's army. It is not just the combined will of 100,000 people, but also the soul of the entire Alabasta populace, the will of 220 million. No one can destroy the condensed soul of an army, even if Ezekiel's own Conqueror's haki becomes 10 times stronger. Ezekiel took off his coat, put on the royal cloak Pell had brought, and raised his hands to respond to his warriors. "Stand up." With a roar, all the soldiers stood up, waiting for their king's orders. At this moment, the members of the Donquixote family were a bit bewildered. No matter how much power they had demonstrated at sea, they had never wielded such authority. Until now, they had considered themselves the kings of the sea. But even the people from the world government looked at the former young heir of the celestial dragons as they would at disobedient children. "Will you surrender on your own, or shall we decide your fate for you?" Zephyr smirked, as an icy battle smasher appeared where his right hand once was. Isso was already drawing his sword from its sheath, while under Ezekiel's cold gaze laser beams began to form on his fingers. "We will surrender," Diamante said, looking at the young master, who was in a coma, and ultimately made the decision for the family. After all, the opponent had graciously offered them the chance to cease resistance. Clearly, their goal wasn't to kill them, as it seemed the identity of their young lord was too unique. They could have easily been killed regardless of their decision. A group of soldiers stepped forward and bound the entire Donquixote family with sea stone chains. Then Ezekiel turned his head and said to Nami, "Nami, let's go." "Where are we going?" Nami asked. "To greet our friends," Ezekiel replied coldly, his eyes dimming. Although Isso hadn't announced his early arrival, it was fortunate that a large army of 100,000 had gathered and appeared in Syrup Village at this moment. There was no doubt that the world government must have a backup plan. Ezekiel was certain of this. Outside Syrup Village, there were 10 Navy warships. 3 individuals stood there, a bored man basking in the sun, a tall man with dark curly hair, and a yawning old man wearing a dog-themed hood. Navy Admiral Kazuru. Navy Admiral Okiji. Hero of the Navy Vice Admiral Garp. So many warships, do they belong to Alabasta, and is Zephyr on this island too? Okiji asked. They're already here. They are indeed from Alabasta. Their king is a real monster, Kazuru squinted, enjoying the sunlight. At this time 100,000 soldiers marched behind Ezekiel and finally landed on the shore. They calmly looked at the 2 admirals and Garp. I am king of Alabasta, Ezekiel Nefertari. The former Navy Admiral Zephyr has now joined the Royal Army of Alabasta as a marshal. Before that, he was a member of the Marines. I'd like to ask the world government, is leaving the Marines a crime? Since he couldn't act secretly, Ezekiel decided to act directly and openly. If the world government thinks they can arrest him, let them try. Apologies, Your Majesty, Okiji said, his gaze resting on Zephyr, more concerned that he now had an icy arm. I can't answer that question for you. If you have objections, please report them to the world government. Our orders are to capture or kill the defector Zephyr. Thus, both sides quickly reached a peaceful and friendly exchange. Doflamingo and his family committed a crime by attacking a member of the royal family, so they were accidentally taken into custody by a passing Marine headquarters ship. Doflamingo was arrested, and his family was transported to Alabasta. The army returned to Alabasta. Okiji readily agreed to this, believing that Ezekiel needed a group of hostages. They only had to ensure the safety of the heavenly demon, Doflamingo. As for the family, it depended on the situation. In any case, the other side did not release them. Ezekiel stood in front of the harbor, watching as the Marine headquarters warship gradually sailed away. Beside him were Fujitora Zephyr and Nami. Now it truly begins, he sighed. As of today, the conflict between Alabasta and the world government with the Marine headquarters had finally reached a new height. He would no longer try to maintain balance as in the past. Your existence has made the world government feel threatened, Fujitora said in a deep voice. The longer he followed Ezekiel, the more he could sense the many irrationalities in this world. Obviously the Marines proclaimed justice, yet they wanted to arrest or even execute a former admiral who had never committed any evil, a former admiral who had dedicated 50 or 60 years to the Marine headquarters. Doflamingo was clearly an evil pirate, but due to his connection with the heavenly dragons, the world government tolerated him. Obviously, Ezekiel was a wise and great king, yet the world government marked him as a threat. It's absurd. Thinking about this, Fujitora slightly smirked. Nami was utterly bewildered by this series of events. Even if another guy jumped out claiming to be the admiral of the fleet of the Marine headquarters, she wouldn't be surprised, knowing who these monsters were. In less than half a day, a multitude of events occurred. She was just a thief from East Blue. She had encountered a Shishibukai, two admirals, a former Marine Guard admiral, a king, a hero of the Marine Guard, a monster known to rival an admiral, and an army of 100,000. This scene is truly unimaginable. And the man standing against all this pressure is this person. She looked at Ezekiel. He is a true king. Ezekiel doesn't have time to consider Nami's thoughts. He has everything calculated. The Marine Guard will definitely retreat this time. If they don't, he has a second trick up his sleeve involving a new application that's about to launch. Ocean TV. It's important to know that mobile phones can now fully realize video functions. And Ezekiel recorded everything that happened earlier. This will serve as evidence. No matter how powerful it is, the world government cannot stop the people of the world. Additionally, this app will be organized by Morgans for big news. As for who will approach that guy, Ezekiel already has a candidate. In less than a day, information about the cancellation of Zephyr's wanted order spread worldwide. The world government also issued a clarification, stating it was a misunderstanding. Zephyr just resigned from the Marines and joined the Royal Fleet of Alabasta. At the same time, the concept of the Royal Fleet was rather unique, as explained in the news headline. This is because the land area of Alabasta is too large, making it difficult for the world government's Marines to provide full protection for the country. Thus, a national private fleet, created as an emergency measure similar to a local army, was approved by the world government. The world government can only grit its teeth and acknowledge them. At the same time, it is necessary to understand that Alabasta is by no means comparable to dragons, revolutionaries. It is a real country, and they are also a super kingdom with the status of one of the last 20 kings. Though it poses an even greater threat. In Logue Town, looking at the news on his mobile phone screen, Smoker was shocked. He hunted down today's newspaper for comparison to verify the news. Only after confirmation did he let out a long sigh of relief. Teacher Zephyr, you didn't lie to me. So, thinking about this, Smoker took a deep breath, blowing out smoke. In any case, I'm still a Marines. He simply switched from playing for the world government to playing for Alabasta. In the Marine Guard, many Marine officers often moved from position to position. But Zephyr was identified as a wanted criminal, almost equivalent to a pirate, yet given the current circumstances, he is also considered a Marines. The Honorable Marshal of the Royal Fleet of Alabasta. So, what truly baffled Sengoku happened in less than 3 days. A whole host of elite Marines representatives sent him resignation letters, and some even left with just a wave of the hand. And will the Marines just accept this? Sengoku thoughtfully said. This is all the influence of Zephyr, and almost all of these people are his students. The Vice Admiral himself looked indifferent. After seeing the news a few days ago, he already understood that this might happen. But in the end, they're not pirates, they're on the side of the world government. Sengoku said with some concern. Zephyr is set free, and a few Marines are nothing, he calmly told the Vice Admiral. Alabasta must have long been on the world government's blacklist. Back in the past, and now as well. Indeed, in the eyes of the world government, Alabasta is comparable to Ohara, and sooner or later it will be eliminated, just like Ohara in the past. It's just that this king is not someone you can simply push aside if you want. The Vice Admiral remembered the mobile phone he was fiddling with earlier. The potential of this thing is much greater than they imagined. Oh, how. You should go to Alabasta too. I'll be waiting for you in Alubarna. The Vice Admiral of the Marines hung up his mobile phone. That rascal Lons! Yelled Sengoku, gritting his teeth as he heard the phone go dead. A similar scene was happening all over the world. Although Sengoku received only a few hundred resignation letters, the lower-ranking officers received even more. In the end, the number of Marine members who resigned from the world government was enormous, and almost all of them were elite, not only from headquarters but also from branches in various locations, leaving the Marines somewhat disorganized for a time. They are coming from all sides and gathering in the same direction, trying to complete the final meeting. In Alabasta, it was said that a new city would be built there. And in this city would be the headquarters of the Royal Fleet. Marshal Zephyr is already there. The former port city of Nanakana has now been renamed Willport, as Ezekiel believes that the old name no longer suits the city. It is set to become the largest port in Alabasta, open to the world, turning into a major international port. When Alabasta's fleet arrived in Willport, almost 10 days had passed. This was largely because the talented navigator Nami was using navigation on her mobile phone. Otherwise, reaching Alabasta in such a short time would have been impossible. During this time, mobile phone sales finally exceeded 10 million. The fruitability has improved once again. Mobile phone class 7. Current number of users 10 million. Mobile phone memory 540 GB/800 GB. With 4G network capability. Download speed 1 MB/sec. Upload distance 150 km. In terms of growth of basic attributes, the memory capacity increased only to 540 GB, and the upload distance and speed were optimized, but it is still a 4G network. However, a new feature appeared after the update. Network drive module enabled, storage capacity 10 times that of the phone's memory. The network drive module means that Ezekiel can upload user capabilities from their mobile phones directly to the network drive, and then download them directly from there as needed. There is no doubt that this is an extremely useful feature. After all, the mobile phone's memory capacity for Ezekiel is only 800 GB. It is indeed impossible to upload all capabilities, not to mention that some of them are very large, though they have not yet reached a certain level of capability. After receiving the network drive function, Ezekiel sent mobile phones to each of the detained members of the Daffy family, allowing them to watch the news without any issues. The detainees were being held in a cell below deck, which Ezekiel called preferential treatment for prisoners. In reality, he secretly downloaded the abilities of each one and uploaded them to the network drive. Among them, Pika's ability required a moderate memory capacity of 20 GB, which is suitable for Alabasta. If the level were too high, Will wouldn't actually be able to find even a few guys with such great potential to upload such abilities to them. At the moment, there is a suitable candidate. In a separate cell, Koro was sitting alone on the floor, wearing glasses with his legs and arms shackled in sea stone. Ezekiel lit some flickering oil lamps and entered the cell. Why would a person like you pay attention to someone as trivial as me? It's very strange. He is just a weak person not worth mentioning. And this king as strong as a marine admiral, why doesn't he just kill him or hand him over to the marines? Ezekiel didn't answer his question but tossed him a phone. Koro raised his hand to catch it. He had already heard about it and knew it was similar to a den mushy phone. 100 gigabyte. Not bad, Ezekiel smiled. This guy actually surprised him. Generally speaking, the Admiral level has a memory capacity limit close to 300 gigabytes or even more, with his own ability taking more than 150 or even 200 gigabytes of memory, while Koro's potential is 100 gigabytes, although he is currently using only 5 gigabytes. His statistics were quite decent, comparable to a vice admiral. Koro, do you want to work for me? Ezekiel asked him. Koro was stunned for a moment. He never got this king would want him on his team. What was his worth? The more Koro thought about it, the more doubts he had. You have no other choice. Ezekiel didn't give him a chance to think. Koro looked intently at Ezekiel and finally nodded in agreement with his current situation. Since the king said so, regardless of what he got, he had no other option. The only chance to survive was to comply, to work for the king and make himself useful to him. Otherwise, either the Marines or Alabasta could easily arrange his death. I am ready to serve you, Your Majesty, he said. The ability of the Ishi no Mi immediately began to upload into Koro's memory. Ezekiel wasn't afraid that Koro would deceive him because firstly, he could take the ability back, and secondly, one of the biggest drawbacks of the mobile phone fruit was that its uploaded ability wouldn't be enhanced regardless of personal characteristics. How could Ezekiel be afraid of a 20 gigabytes ability? I will grant you new powers, you'll feel it in just a few hours. Ezekiel's smile sent shivers down Koro's spine. You've chosen the right king, and I'll prove it to you. You will be pleasantly surprised. Ezekiel left the cell with Koro and arranged for Koro to have a cabin. About 5 or 6 hours later, Koro was shocked. Because just as Ezekiel had said, he awakened some sort of ability, as if he had been born with it, suddenly gaining strength, and it was the Paramcia Ishi no Mi. King, how do you do it? If I remember correctly, this ability is called the Ishi no Mi, right? He even went to the cell in the hold to make sure Pika was still alive. Koro's heart turned cold and trembled. He didn't understand anything, but he was starting to truly fear Ezekiel. The soldiers of Alabasta's army did not disembark at the port, but continued their journey along the river Sandora to assist Zephyr in building the city of the royal fleet. Is this Alabasta? Nami stood on the bow deck early in the morning, observing the bustling harbor of Willport from a distance. So many people. She had never been in such a densely populated city or country. The population here was much greater than in the village of Kokoyasi. There were no fanfares, no one knew that His Majesty King Ezekiel had arrived at the port. Thick pipes leading into the ground were immediately noticeable. These pipes deliver water to millions of households. In Alabasta, this is called the Life Canals, part of the River of Life project, meaning the water supply network delivers water directly to homes. Nami strolled through the streets of Willport wearing the latest Alabasta fashion. These creations were made to Ezekiel's taste, and Nami looked exceptionally stylish, attracting attention from everyone around her. She glanced around and remarked to herself, "Wow, this is Alabasta. It's so beautiful here. Everything is more exquisite than in East Blue." Before arriving in Alabasta, this girl was filled with endless dreams and expectations, along with immense goodwill, and now she loved everything. Since the king of this land had saved her, naturally, she admired everything he governed. She felt such wholehearted affection, as if she were a native of these places, even more so than the local Alabasta residents. Ahead, a large group of people gathered at an intersection, and Nami, with big bags in hand, joined the excitement out of curiosity, with Ezekiel and Fujitara not far behind. "Hey, boys. You can't sell water." A corpulent man resembling an official angrily kicked over several buckets, causing a large amount of water to spill out. A few young men immediately grabbed their buckets desperately, and one of them said with an extremely angry expression, "Why can't we sell water?" His Majesty the King announced in the news that anyone could freely obtain water from the River of Life project. They were taking water not from the distant Sandora River but from a closer channel just outside the city where the River of Life engineering works had already been completed. Although there are pipelines in the city, not every place has water yet. There's no connection to each house, and so residents still have to go out of the city to fetch water. And some people were bringing water from outside the city to sell here at a low price. This was convenient for the residents and an opportunity for some to make money. The official coldly looked at the young men, feeling great dissatisfaction and anger in his heart. That king again. Damn it. If he has hundreds of billions of berries with no place to spend them, he should give them to me instead of helping these untouchables create the River of Life. Yes, His Majesty said it. The decree was published in the news app during the construction period. Anyone can freely obtain the water necessary for survival from the River of Life. Added another guy. And there's nothing illegal about selling water in the city if we brought it. Added a third. Why won't you let us sell water? No, you bastards. I'll have you all arrested. The official got angry, and all the soldiers under his command rushed at the offenders. After all, an official is an official. The situation frightened the ordinary people around. No one dared to say anything. The official smiled. That's how the weak should behave. It's wonderful when they listen to you obediently. Seeing that the soldiers were indeed about to seize these innocent people, the smile on Nami's face disappeared. Does it mean that any country, even one ruled by this king, cannot escape such oppression? Even in such a large country with so many people, no one dares to resist. Stop this! Will stepped forward. Everyone saw a man, his entire body hidden by a cloak, emerge from the crowd, walk among the people, and look at the official. Who are you? The official asked coldly. Ezekiel slowly removed his cloak and stared at him with a pair of dark eyes. I am the king of this country. Time froze, and the people were silent. Ezekiel's face had been on the front pages of the news for a long time. Thus people recognized him and watched with interest. As long as there are mobile phones in this country, there is no one who doesn't know the king. This is also the strategy that Ezekiel adhered to. He wants to build a country with a high concentration of power to achieve unparalleled results. The official sweated profusely, his back was completely wet. It's really that king. Why? Why is he here? Now they'll surely execute me. I'm going to die. The official looked at Ezekiel, who seemed to be without any guards, then turned to the crowd and shouted to his subordinates. This guy is impersonating His Majesty the King. Arrest him. The subordinates hesitated. Do you think you hold unlimited power? A somewhat angry and low male voice spoke from behind the official. He turned his head and saw a tall blind warrior. The warrior slowly drew his sword, coldly gazing at him with his white blind eyes. The blind man was completely exasperated by the disrespect shown to his king. Gravity blade. The hefty official was firmly pressed to the ground by an invisible gravity, creating a large hole beneath him. Everyone around was shocked. It really is His Majesty the King. And that's so. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. These people are showing disrespect to the king. Arrest them. Kill them. Ezekiel's appearance was like a spark that ignited an explosion, setting everything ablaze in an instant. The eyes of the surrounding people were gradually becoming wild. More and more of them were gathering, and their cries were getting louder and louder. The crowd pushed and squeezed forward, like a torrent, like swarms of ants. Simply because the king was here. The soldiers' faces were pale as the crowd surrounded and pressed them like a flood. Until this moment, it's not that they dared not to resist. They just lacked a leader. Nami was stunned by this tumultuous scene. She had never seen anything like it. It turned out that ordinary people could create such a magnificent scene when they came together. Was this the real Alabasta? Thanks to this king, the people of Alabasta remembered their strength. Isso smiled at this scene and was deeply moved. His eyes were fixed on the king, who was surrounded by people like a great blazing fire. In this world, there has never been a perfect country and perfect people, so a king is needed to guide them on the right path. Ezekiel is the true king. The project is free for building infrastructure, but water needs to be purchased with money. Previously, obtaining water required a lot of money. Sometimes a person could spend the money but not get water. Now, you just need to pay a small fee for water to receive it 24 hours a day. For the residents of Alabasta, there's nothing better. Fortunately, with mobile news and the forum, it was easy to gather a group of scientists and inventors. Although they can't compare to Vegapunk, at least this group of scientists engaged in mechanical and other research. Those who were initially underestimated were grateful to work for Ezekiel. Thus a modest Royal Academy of Sciences was established. The first thing invented at the king's request was a special water meter, adapted to Alabasta's needs. This meter was carefully developed over a long period, and a large number of factories were created for its production. Use as much water as you need, and the special meter in your home will calculate the payment. Collecting water bills also became simple. Generally speaking, a family's monthly water bill is about 1,000 berries. This amount of money is beyond imagination. The officials of Alabasta never got that the River of Life project could generate money. Nami got the same. They all believed that the River of Life was simply the king's benevolent love for his people. But everyone knows that at the state level, no action is purely benevolent, and any project has significant interests and goals. However, this kind of interest is sometimes not a direct interest in wealth. And of course, the River of Life is no exception. A bill for water. Nami expressed shock, then dryly asked, approximately how much is it? If you calculate per capita, the water bill per person per month is about 500 berries, Ezekiel smiled. It's really not that much, so little that almost everyone can easily afford it. After all, a newspaper costs 100 berries. This is a desert country. Nami calculated, Alabasta has a population of 220 million people. In reality, counting them is impossible. There could be more if you conduct a census. Even if we take 200 million people, what does that make it for a year? Nami pondered. Somewhere around 110 billion berries per month. Actually, right now it's not so much, but as a necessity for survival, I think that number will increase in the future. 110 billion berries per month. That's 1,320 billion a year. In just 1 year. The River of Life project cost only a little over 100 billion berries. In just 1 year, the kingdom can recoup the cost of 10 River of Life projects. Fujitara, who was listening to the conversation between these two people, couldn't help but be excited. Nami looked at Will with some horror and for the first time realized just how calculating this king, who seemed like a simple charming fool, truly was. He is calculating. He is greedy. That doesn't even do him justice. He is manipulating the world. What is 1,320 billion berries? Does the world government have that much money? The answer is yes, probably even more. But that is the accumulation of the world government over 800 years, while Ezekiel's wealth lies in the fact that as long as the country doesn't collapse, he will receive that amount every year. In this world, including the world government, no one has ever engaged in building infrastructure for ordinary people, and no one has profited from building infrastructure. Usually, they give a person a piece of land for free activity and then collect taxes regularly. Those who cannot afford to pay taxes become slaves or are expelled from the city. Like for example in the Kingdom of Goa in East Blue, where in reality, only a few people live in the city. How much tax can be collected there? Speaking of the world governed by the world government, each country still has its own army. However, since the celestial dragons charge a huge tax annually in exchange for the protection of the world government, the armed forces of many countries can only be described as pitiful. The reason Alabasta can maintain an army of 600,000 is actually inseparable from the welfare influence of not having to pay the celestial tribute. The project is free for building infrastructure, but water needs to be purchased with money. Previously, obtaining water required a lot of money. Sometimes a person could spend the money but not get water. Now, you just need to pay a small fee for water to receive it 24 hours a day. For the residents of Alabasta, there's nothing better. Fortunately, with mobile news and the forum, it was easy to gather a group of scientists and inventors. Although they can't compare to Vegapunk, at least this group of scientists engaged in mechanical and other research. Those who were initially underestimated were grateful to work for Ezekiel. Thus a modest Royal Academy of Sciences was established. The first thing invented at the king's request was a special water meter, adapted to Alabasta's needs. This meter was carefully developed over a long period, and a large number of factories were created for its production. Use as much water as you need, and the special meter in your home will calculate the payment. Collecting water bills also became simple. Generally speaking, a family's monthly water bill is about 1,000 berries. This amount of money is beyond imagination. The officials of Alabasta never got that the River of Life project could generate money. Nami got the same. They all believed that the River of Life was simply the king's benevolent love for his people. But everyone knows that at the state level, no action is purely benevolent, and any project has significant interests and goals. However, this kind of interest is sometimes not a direct interest in wealth. And of course, the River of Life is no exception. A bill for water. Nami expressed shock, then dryly asked, approximately how much is it? If you calculate per capita, the water bill per person per month is about 500 berries, Ezekiel smiled. It's really not that much, so little that almost everyone can easily afford it. After all, a newspaper costs 100 berries. This is a desert country. Nami calculated, Alabasta has a population of 220 million people. In reality, counting them is impossible. There could be more if you conduct a census. Even if we take 200 million people, what does that make it for a year? Nami pondered. Somewhere around 110 billion berries per month. Actually, right now it's not so much, but as a necessity for survival, I think that number will increase in the future. 110 billion berries per month. That's 1,320 billion a year. In just 1 year. The River of Life project cost only a little over 100 billion berries. In just 1 year, the kingdom can recoup the cost of 10 River of Life projects. Fujitara, who was listening to the conversation between these two people, couldn't help but be excited. Nami looked at Will with some horror and for the first time realized just how calculating this king, who seemed like a simple charming fool, truly was. He is calculating. He is greedy. That doesn't even do him justice, he is manipulating the world. What is 1,320 billion berries? Does the world government have that much money? The answer is yes, probably even more. But that is the accumulation of the world government over 800 years, while Ezekiel's wealth lies in the fact that as long as the country doesn't collapse, he will receive that amount every year. In this world, including the world government, no one has ever engaged in building infrastructure for ordinary people, and no one has profited from building infrastructure. Usually, they give a person a piece of land for free activity and then collect taxes regularly. Those who cannot afford to pay taxes become slaves or are expelled from the city. Like for example in the Kingdom of Goa in East Blue, where in reality, only a few people live in the city. How much tax can be collected there? Speaking of the world governed by the world government, each country still has its own army. However, since the celestial dragons charge a huge tax annually in exchange for the protection of the world government, the armed forces of many countries can only be described as pitiful. The reason Alabasta can maintain an army of 600,000 is actually inseparable from the welfare influence of not having to pay the celestial tribute. In reality, Ezekiel's previous statement that there isn't a single bank in the world is incorrect. Strictly speaking, there is definitely a bank. Otherwise, who would issue the berries? But in some sense, it can also be said there isn't a bank. The correct way to say it is that there is no bank in the way Will understands. Banks perform functions such as currency issuance, currency management, deposit storage, and lending. They can even manipulate the value of a country's currency and promote development on a national level by regulating the economy. Generally speaking, they can do everything related to money. However, the banks in this world have only one function: they can store money, and there's absolutely no guarantee of security. The World Bank established by the world government is the complete opposite. It cannot store money but has the authority to issue berries. Because of the meaningless production of money, berries are so cheap, and the celestial dragons do not use berries as currency. The biggest problem at present is not the production of money, but rather how to make people wealthy. This problem is difficult to solve on Earth. It might be feasible here because this world has its advantages. The physical capabilities of an individual person are much higher than those of people on Earth. The devil fruits are magical items, and sometimes they can indeed perform miracles. For example, on Earth, even several trillion berries wouldn't necessarily guarantee the completion of a super-engineering river of life. But in this world, with devil fruits and the workforce, this project is truly completed. Your Majesty, the Royal Bank of Alabasta has opened 100 branches across Alabasta with a total investment of over 5 billion berries. In accordance with your requirements, all offices operate using exclusive application permissions provided by you on the mobile phone. However, currently, too few people are using the new currency, the bank treasurer said to Will. Ezekiel is not worried about this, they will accept it sooner or later. The exclusive application of the Royal Bank of Alabasta will soon be launched on the mobile phone. Anyone can store their berries in the Royal Bank and choose the new currency that Alabasta uses in the country, and the current exchange rate of Alabasta's official currency to berries is 1 to 10. In other words, 100 berries are equivalent to $10 new, and 100 million berries are equivalent to 10 million new dollars. Although Ezekiel has initiated the exchange of new coins and berries, not many Alabasta residents have used the new coins. But Ezekiel did not use coercive means and did not force people to exchange money. However, the mobile phone charge and the water bill are only charged in dollars instead of berries, so people have to go to the bank to exchange berries for dollars to pay. Although this is not significant, it already means that the dollar is truly becoming an integral part of the Alabasta people, so it also has value. Additionally, all Alabasta employees have started receiving their salaries in dollars, which means that all civil servants will use the dollar. Even if they immediately go to the bank to exchange it for berries, they first receive dollars. Ezekiel wants people to smoothly accept the new currency. So far only the water bill and mobile phone are paid for. But there are too many things to pay for in the future. The new port city of Alabasta, Iruma. Ship after ship through the Sandora River brought stones quarried from desert pits somewhere deep in Alabasta. Smoker smoked a cigar, followed by Tashigi. Both of them were following Zephyr to Iruma. Shortly after they arrived here, they were summoned by the king. They went to meet with Ezekiel. Captain Smoker. That man seems to be. Tashigi's gaze was fixed on Koro. Smoker nodded. He remembered that this was once a pirate, and the bounty on him still reached tens of millions. The teacher told me to ask His Majesty myself. He wanted to know the reasons for using pirates. He didn't want to just leave the world government and join another world government. Koro noticed Smoker, but he wasn't afraid because he was no longer a pirate. Calmly looking at the marine, he reached out to touch the massive stone in front of him. The stone quickly merged with him and transformed into a giant hand, then gradually absorbed all the surrounding stones and finally became a gigantic boulder. The stone giant stretched out its hand and swallowed all the stones that hadn't been unloaded from the ship, as if they were food, and its body grew larger and larger. Soon, a colossal stone giant hundreds of meters tall appeared in the port. Most people weren't surprised because this scene had happened many times recently. This man was the general manager of the Royal Construction Company Alabasta and possessed the power to manipulate stones. Crunch. A massive boulder transformed into a towering castle that stood on the shoreline, even taller than the Marine headquarters at Marineford. Such an enormous headquarters like Marineford would typically take years to construct manually, but under the power of the Ishi no Mi, it took only a few minutes. Chomp. Another batch of stones was absorbed by Koro, and he once again turned into a giant. Smoker and Tashigi stood in shock. The cigar fell from Smoker's mouth to the ground, and he didn't even notice. He stared blankly at the constructed castle. This scene left a strong impression on Smoker. So that's how devil fruits can be used. For the first time, Smoker's worldview was shaken. Smoker possesses the power of a devil fruit, But even before he acquired this power, everything he had heard about devil fruits was that their strength was used to kill and fight. But now, Smoker saw everything in a different light. He was wrong. This is the right way to use a devil fruit. When Smoker and Tashigi arrived in Alubarna, they saw that it was bustling with activity as well. Carts loaded with stones were being brought into the city on newly laid train tracks, and tens of thousands of workers were engaged in renovations. The road within the royal capital had been expanded to incredible widths. At least now it can accommodate 10 carts simultaneously. Why design such a wide road? Smoker didn't know, but he didn't have time to think about it. Soon he entered the inner hall of the palace. Ezekiel was eager to see him. After all, Smoker's potential also exceeds 200 gigabytes, and his combat experience is relatively rich. A guy worthy of transformation. Entering the palace, there's a sense of grandeur. The hall was not as poor as Smoker had imagined. It could even be described as luxurious. This is the king's palace. Even this king cannot help but enjoy life. He also noticed that people were entering the palace one after another with extremely exquisite antiques. They were bringing in vases, ornaments, paintings, and gemstones. A fierce girl was shouting and directing. "Hey! That's a vase with a 2,000-year history. You idiot. Don't touch that. It's worth $5 million. The angry girl then seemed to notice them and approached with her hands on her hips. "Hey, why are you two just standing around? Go help move things." Before Tashigi and Smoker could say anything, they were pushed out the door by the furious woman. There were all sorts of rare treasures outside. "Get moving. Can't you see it's about to rain?" The angry woman shouted menacingly. "We came to see His Majesty," Smoker frowned. "Who isn't here to meet His Majesty?" The angry woman raised her eyebrows fearlessly. "Hurry up and work." She was right. Many workers who came for jobs were not actually there for the money, but for the chance to see Ezekiel. Smoker and Tashigi stared at each other, utterly confused, somehow turned into porters by this fiery girl with orange hair. It must be said, she was a powerful presence, certainly stronger than the average person carrying things. Nami ordered the two of them to get to work, while continuing to shout at the other workers, "You bastards! Move it! What am I paying you for?" The workers gave a bitter smile. They knew that their wages were paid by His Majesty the King, but the angry woman was simply too emotional. "If it weren't for His Majesty's insistence, you wouldn't be paying them at all, you angry girl. Why God? Why must there be such a vicious woman near His Majesty?" Of course, they dared not say anything. Ezekiel was waiting in the manager's office. "Fujitora-san, what time is it?" Fujitora slowly lifted his head and said, "Your Majesty, I think it's time for a meal." Immediately after, Fujitora's stomach went. "Brrrr." Ezekiel looked at him, unsure of what to say. Fujitora's old face turned red, and he coughed twice, getting old. Soon, the smell of food wafted through. After all, as King, Ezekiel has the privilege of eating whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Though it seems Fujitora had gotten a bit heavier. As long as it didn't get dark, or start raining soon, as the angry woman Nami had said. "Fortunately you moved things before it started raining. After all, it will rain in less than 10 hours, she said with a deep breath, eating her hot meal. "Rain in less than 10 hours. You're a devil." Smoker was ready to explode. They hadn't even eaten anything. Then the workers heard Nami's much anticipated voice. "So as a reward for helping this time, not only will you receive your salary, but you'll also have the chance to meet His Majesty, Ezekiel. More importantly, if you're willing to forego the money, I can also get you His Majesty's autograph." "How can someone not want money, you angry girl?" Smoker looked at her, and got viciously to himself. Even Tashigi got Nami was joking. After all, it was such exhausting work. "Really? I don't need any money. I don't need any money." Voices rang out one after another. Smoker and Tashigi looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Were these people crazy? Nami laughed at them, and led everyone to the administration. Fujitora and Will had been waiting all day. Unexpectedly, not only Smoker and Tashigi came to them, but a whole crowd of workers as well. But when Ezekiel saw Smoker among the crowd of workers, his expression was very telling. especially when Nami patted Smoker and Tashigi on the shoulders and praised them. These two workers have worked the hardest today. Thank you. Why not stay as loaders in the future? I'll give you a salary of 100 berries. 100 berries. Everyone screamed internally. Seeing the slightly bewildered look on Smoker and Tashigi's faces, Ezekiel finally couldn't hold back his laughter because the scene was truly absurd. Ha ha ha. Nami, you're a devil. Smoker and Tashigi worked for you all day. Only then did Nami realize that these two were not workers at all, but rather the two former naval officers Ezekiel wanted to meet today, the new captain and warrant officer of the Royal Fleet of Alabasta. You could have mentioned that earlier. Nami brushed it off lightly. Didn't we say it? You angry girl. Smoker got for a moment, and then asked a serious question. Ezekiel, your majesty, does Alabasta really have so much money to buy these treasures for decorating the palace? Fujitara, standing to the side, felt the disdain in Smoker's tone. He frowned, but said nothing. Honestly, he didn't understand himself why his king bought all these useless things. It was unclear. Ezekiel smiled, stood up, and gestured around the palace. Smoker, do you know how old this palace is? For more fanfictions and 60+ chapters in advance, follow me on Patreon. The link is in the description below.